All right, topping the news this hour, Congress is officially wrapping up its last few days in session before the November elections. And short of a mathematical miracle, the 112th Congress could go down in history as the least productive since the 1947 Do-Nothing Congress that served under President Harry Truman. And this is something that hasn't gone unnoticed.
Scott, I have to tell you, Congress managed to get through last year without passing one single piece of significant legislation.
This Congress invented the word do-nothing Congress. Do nothing.
You talk about Republicans. In fact, the president's effectively campaigning against a do-nothing Congress of Republicans.
I think he should run against this do-nothing Congress.
Why in the world would Republicans be here today when there is so much other work that this Congress has failed to do, be here presenting what is really an anti-work resolution masquerading as pro-work?
But it's more than that. The 1947 Congress was able to pass some 906 bills. As of last month, the 112th Congress had passed a mere 173. But beyond the numbers, the fact is that Capitol Hill is getting ready to close its doors without having found a solution to military funding, taxes, the Farm Bill, cybersecurity, and much, much more. Now, as I mentioned, many people are calling this the Do-Nothing Congress. But that's not exactly accurate. Individually, the Senate and House have been very productive in passing bills, and they've been arguably working more than previous Congresses. So, for an inside look at what exactly is going on here, Congressman Danny K. Davis, who represents the 7th District of Illinois, joined me earlier for more.
Well, I think we have formally recessed. For quite some time. And it's so unfortunate because this was such an excellent opportunity to pass meaningful legislation and find serious relief for the American people. To think that we don't have a budget, living on a continuing resolution when there are things that we know need to be done. Transportation, for example, we know that everybody could benefit from a transportation bill that would create jobs, spur economic development, as well as, fix up our infrastructure, highways, roads, bridges, all kinds of things. But, if you have one part of the process saying that their main objective is to make sure that the president is a one-term president, or that the president should not be re-elected, and they're going to do whatever they could to make that happen. I hope that the American people will understand why we call this a do-nothing Congress.
And I know that Senator Dick Durbin actually called transportation bills the easiest on Capitol Hill. Now, you've been serving in Congress since 1996. Can you compare the Congress then versus the one that we're facing today?
Quite frankly, I don't think that we've ever experienced, since I've been engaged in politics, and especially electoral politics, the kind of partisanship. Almost every item that comes up for a vote, if it's meaningful, you have Democrats on one side, Republicans on the other, or if you have the House, know that the Senate can't go along with that. If the Senate passes some meaningful legislation, then of course the House is not with that. And so we end up at a standstill. We end up waiting for the November election to be some kind of vindication of which side was right, which side was wrong. And I think that's most unfortunate. But I mean, that's what some people call hardball politics. And I hope that the people will realize that the best way to move the country forward would be to elect, and in some instances, certainly re-elect individuals who have the interests of the country at heart. and do not play this partisan brinksmanship all the time.
And Congressman, I know that this is a sentiment not only felt by you and felt by the American people, but it's one that has been expressed by members of Congress. They're even complaining about the lack of work that's getting done. I want to play for you a quick part of the speech that Senator Coburn delivered this week about this very issue.
Monday mornings when I get up about 4:30 to catch a flight to come back up here. And I've noticed that I have an attitude problem. I don't want to come anymore. And the reason I don't want to come anymore is because we're not doing anything to address the real problems that are in front of our country. We're ignoring the real problems so we can create political contrasts for an election, all the while the country is sinking.
Now, Congressman, we also did manage to get a couple of responses from other members to Senator Coburn's comments. So I want to get a listen to them, and then I'll get your opinion on both of them.
Well, I enjoy the job I have, and I'm honored to be representing the 6th District of Pennsylvania. And I get up every day, and I enjoy the work that we do to help people in our district and have a chance to represent them here and vote on important issues. So I look forward to it every day. Can't speak for other members of Congress, but I enjoy my job. So.
Has it gotten that bad?
Well, I'm sure it has in the Senate. So, you know, I still think we can make a difference here, but the Senate frustrates me and makes me not want to get up on Monday, and I'm not even in the Senate.
So as you mentioned, we know that historically Congresses that are divided between Republican and Democratic majorities tend to be less productive. But this is more than a partisanship issue, right?
I would think so, because we've gotten down to certain kind of philosophical constructs. Much of the argument has been around the question of taxation. For example, is it fair to tax the middle class inappropriately and not tax the top 1% or the people with the most money? And I think what Democrats have been saying is, let's be fair across the board and let's provide the kind of taxation that everybody can be comfortable with, where you tax those at the very top at least somewhere close to the same rate as you're taxing those in the middle and those at the bottom. The Republicans seemingly will not buy that. I mean, so that's a big issue. Plus, there's the philosophical issue. Some people believe that government really shouldn't do a great deal for the individual citizen and the individual taxpayer, and that all of the programs that we call safety net, that they ought to be cut, wiped out. You know, there are times when all we hear about from the other side is cut. If all you do is cut, all you get is blood. And the bleeding will be across the people of this great nation, and that does not have to happen.
Now, I know that one of the things that you and your fellow House members have faced personally is that this Congress has attempted to repeal, the House in particular has attempted to repeal the Affordable Care Act a total of 33 times that I know of. So they are attempting to do something. Are they spending too much time trying to do the wrong thing?
Well, I think that anybody who would try their best to dismantle and wipe out one of the most meaningful pieces of legislation that has been passed in this country in the last 40 years or so, I don't understand them. After Medicare and Medicaid, in terms of health care for low-income people, for elderly people, for people who don't have much, we've never seen anything as impactful as the Affordable Patient Care Act. I mean, more than 30 million people get an opportunity to have health insurance who've never had it before. People get an opportunity to have a regular physician that they can go and see and not find themselves in and out of emergency rooms all of the time receiving what I call episodic care. And so that has to be a big boon. And yet we have people saying, let's dismantle it. They don't need it. I mean, even to the extent of suggesting that people will die, and we know that they will die.
So, Congressman, I also want to take a look at some of the bills that have been passed versus the ones that haven't been passed. If we can go ahead and bring out that graphic. So some of the ones that have been passed is the Zebra Mussel Barrier Act of 2012, renaming dozens of post offices, construction of several courthouses, and the Ski Area Recreational Opportunity Enhancement Act of 2011. The other ones that are still on the table is the Farms Bill, finances for the military, a measure to protect the victims of domestic violence, bills to combat cybercrimes, and bills to fund the U.S. Postal Service. So it looks like we can agree to name the post office buildings, but we can't find ways to fund them. Isn't there a priority list here, or are these just the easiest ones to get passed?
Well, I think you're exactly right. Many of the bills that have been passed on suspension. And of course, what that means is you're not going to have a great deal of argument. I mean, who's going to argue about the naming of a post office? Or who's going to argue about the naming of a federal building? But we've been trying, for example, to get some real direction on what the Postal Service needs in order to remain viable. And we can't get that bill passed. We can't get agreement on that. And I guess we're going to really have to wait until matters are taken up by the citizenry. And I guess if the citizenry will elect individuals coming from their congressional districts to help create the composition of the House and Senate that can work with the president, then I think we will be in much better shape and much better position. I don't have a problem with the idea that people will sometimes disagree, but you don't have to disagree just for the sake of disagreement. I mean, you disagree when there is a solid, logical position or reason that you feel compelled to take. No, we've had people disagreeing because they wanted to try and make sure that the President of the United States is not re-elected. I think the people are going to reject that. I think we're going to see come November that the people do want agreement, that the people do want some logical decisions being made, that people do want to create jobs. They want to spur economic development. They want to protect the rights of all people, including immigrants and others who would come to this country. And I guess matters will be in the hands of the people, and that's where ultimately they always are. And I think we'll see the changes occur in November.
And Congressman, we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you one quick question. In a sentence or less, can you tell me the one bill that you would like to see passed before this Congress is out of session?
Well, I'd love to see the Farm Bill passed. Farmers need relief. We had a tough summer, drought, and all kinds of things happened. I'd love to see a transportation bill so that we can do some of all these infrastructure things that we need to do. And I'd really like to see us have a budget that people can rely upon. They know what it is, they know what to expect, and they know what they're most likely to receive.
That was Congressman Danny K. Davis, a U.S. representative from the 7th District of Illinois. Now, there are several important congressional elections coming up, along with the presidential contest, and this is an issue RT will cover in the coming days and weeks leading up to that election.